Well, welcome back to another session. Today, I am going to be speaking to the topic, what I wish women knew about men. Now, that in itself is a very, very broad statement to make. And I think that's perhaps where I should begin. Generally speaking, when we say men, we're not referring to all men, because the word all represents 100%. When we use the word men, we're referring to the majority. In order for something to be part of the majority, it only has to satisfy 50.1%. So I'm going to be making broad generalizations that are generally true. In any case, if this does not apply, or if each of the statements I share does not apply to the man in your life, or does not apply to you, the man, just eat the meat and spit out the bones. Now let's begin. The first thing to say is all men are not the same. Now that seems fairly obvious a statement to make. However, most men tend to find that in their experiences with women come into the relationship, come into the initial interaction, the encounter, the conversation, with preconceived notions, sometimes unfounded, most of the times based on past experiences. I use the analogy that wherever you go, you take your head with you. In that head are all of the memories you have created from the past. And so most women default into thinking that all men are the same. The man of your past will be the same man in your future. And so most women bring all of the anxiety, fear, and all the negative emotions and experiences from a past relationship into a present engagement. We are not all the same. We are all different. And that simply means the first step to understanding a man is to study the man. Your man will be different. There will be some stripes that are consistent across all men, but they're unique, subtle differences. And number two is that all men have certain needs. Now, our needs vary, but generally speaking, some of the needs we have are needs that we have been born with. These needs are either innate or sometimes biologically hardwired into our very being. Some of the other needs we have are needs we've developed as we've grown. So these needs have been cultivated as you would a taste. Some of the needs we have come in cycles. They're seasonal. And irrespective of the man in your life, one of the first questions that you should ask when you encounter something that seems new, novel, different, strange, disappointing, exciting, is put that need and that experience in one of those buckets. Is this an innate need of his? Is this a recently cultivated need? Is this a seasonal or cyclical need of his? We all have different needs. And number three is that everything we do, strangely, is in pursuit of a woman's affirmation, admiration, approval, praise, affection. Everything we do is for you, the woman. A man's first love is always his mother, and if a mother has been in a man's life, the need to please his mother, the need to be embraced and to be desired in terms of affection by his mother is supreme. However, we always have a different love. Our first love is usually our mothers. Our chosen love tends to be the person we choose to spend time with. And therefore, although we find it very hard to express our emotions, everything we do intrinsically is connected to a woman. If it's a young boy, everything we do is to magnify or increase the probability and the likelihood of getting an attractive woman to have sex with us. If it's a more mature man, everything we do is to find a woman who is attractive and desirable, who will take us as a partner. When we are married, everything we do and all of our life revolves around pleasing you. Now, if everything we do and every motivation we have is intrinsically connected to a woman, then it means you have the upper hand if you are the chosen woman. Now, number 4 is that a man's purpose, a man's calling, a man's passion, a man's work should always be his first love, not you, the woman. It should always be work before woman. And if you find a man who places you before his purpose, before his calling, before his life's vision, that is a man you should avoid for long-term commitments. And the reason is simply because a man who places a woman before work is out of alignment. And at some point in the future, he will find his voice, he will come into contact with his calling, he will discover his purpose, and you will become either unwanted or relegated to second place. It's best to begin in the rightful place. A man who has discovered his purpose, a man who is on the mission to find that purpose, a man who has a purpose or a passion or a vision of a better future. A man who loves to work should always be what a woman longs for. And number 5 is that your experience of us depends on where you meet us. Places were made before people. As a matter of fact, the environment is always more important than the individual. So for example, if you take a fish out of water, the fish will die. The environment is what gives the fish life. If you take a bird out of air and put a bird in a cage, eventually the bird dies. Our environment and where you meet us determines your experience of us. And let me expand on this very, very briefly. Generally speaking, when it comes to relationships, there is something called the relationship marketplace. It's split into 2 parts. You have a dating marketplace and you have what I call a marriage marketplace. This might be those who believe in codependency or want to be in civil partnerships or want to be in marriage. Any form of agreement by 2 parties legally, either through other means, religious ceremony, I categorize those as in the marriage marketplace. So your experience of us depends on where you meet us. In the dating marketplace, we play by very different rules. In the marriage marketplace, we also play by different rules. It's important to understand the rules of the game because we sometimes transition from one marketplace to another, and sometimes we remain in one marketplace. So your experience of the man might be a pleasurable experience or a painful experience if you are not clear about the rules and the environment where you meet the man. Now this brings me to number 6, which is that a man's desire for sex is more powerful than his love for you. There is something intrinsic in our nature. As a matter of fact, we know that the same metaphysical energy required for creativity is the same energy that can be transcended into sexual energy. And a man's desire for sex can be so strong that we go to war, we commit acts that we never would have done if we were thinking straight. We would give up everything just for sex. Sometimes that desire is synonymous with being possessed, as though one is possessed by an animal spirit. This is partly why we can love you, and yet you wonder why we did something to hurt you. A man's desire for sex would always be more powerful than his love. And the reason is simply, or a better way of understanding this is to understand lust and love. Now we know love conquers all things. Over the long term, love wins. In the short term, the intensity of lust can be more powerful than love. The same goes for sex. Now this brings me to number 7, which is that because we're so driven by our loins, ejaculation for a man is very, very similar to urinating for a man. We have a need. That need will be satisfied in whatever means that we can find to have that need satisfied. Depriving a man of the opportunity to meet a sexual need, if you are the only person who can meet that need, in the long run is perhaps not a very smart approach, because at some point, just like we have to go to the bathroom, at some point that need has to be met. So, generally speaking, when it comes to sex, men do not keep a memory of our sexual experience. Just in the same way, when we walk into a public urinal, we do not keep a mental memory of the experience. Now, we know we've used the bathroom, but we do not keep a memory of the experience. And this is partly why sex for men is purely a physical experience, and less so an emotional, spiritual experience. We can have sex without emotions. And so, generally speaking, we want to have sex when the need arises, the same way that we want to go and use the bathroom when the need arises. And number 8 is, though, generally speaking, in the dating marketplace. Now, you remember I talked about the dating marketplace and the marriage marketplace. In the dating marketplace, when we pursue you, the woman, we do not hear what you say until we've tasted you. So, dating for men is simply an audition for sex. When we ask you out on dates, we have already decided what you look like naked, We want to confirm that the picture we have in our imagination is consistent with the reality. But we also want to go a step further. We want to taste you. Dating is the price we pay for the opportunity to be selected. Now, you're the woman, you get to choose because you are the gatekeepers to your body, to your womb, to your emotions, and to your heart. We audition through dates. In the process of dating, we will put up with whatever it takes. Again, go back to my comment about the urge, the desire for sex. We will pretend that we like dogs. We will pretend that we know everything about your hobbies. We will actually learn about your hobbies simply to get in bed with you. That is the mission. So until we have tasted you, all conversations that we have with you will be no different than a human being having a conversation with a dog. The dog doesn't really understand human conversations. The dog can pick up on some emotional cues, but the dog doesn't speak the language. So, ladies, you can hold off on sex as long as you want, but it doesn't mean that he's not getting sex elsewhere. And it also doesn't mean that it will guarantee that he will remain with you longer. As a matter of fact, if you really want to know what man thinks about you, get it over and done with. Now, interestingly speaking, the reason you do not hear back from us, and this is obviously a concern for most women, if I give it up too soon, he'll think of me as a slut, and I won't hear from him. Now, let me distill some myths that exist. The whole concern that women have about being perceived as sluts is ill-conceived. And the reason is simple. In the dating marketplace, we want you to be sluts because in the dating marketplace, all we want is sex. We want you to be so slutty that you consider us for sex. We want you to be that open and free. As a matter of fact, we don't really care if you are the village bicycle, as long as we get to ride you. It matters what we do in the marriage marketplace. In the marriage marketplace, we certainly care about your mileage and we care about your experiences. Now, we don't want you to be a brand new car. Some men do, but generally speaking, we don't want you to be a brand new car, but we don't want you to be a rental car that has been used by everyone. So keep those two things in mind. We don't hear you until we've actually tasted you, and generally speaking, the sooner you give it up has no correlation with whether we stay. If we stay, it's because we like to be around you, we think you're fun, we like your attitude. Maybe the sexual experience was great. If we do not stay, it means something perhaps was repulsive. That may have been your attitude, most likely. May have been the sex itself, probably boring. It could be that perhaps we just don't enjoy your presence. You're not fun to be around with, you're not easy to be around with, and you're too much work. It has nothing to do with giving up sex too early. You can hold us for as long as you wish. Once we get it, like the road to Damascus moment, the scales fall off our eyes once we've tasted you, and then we can then see you for who you really are. Before then, we're possessed. And number 9, and this is something I've encouraged younger women to bear in mind. If your first play with a man is foreplay, then you'll always be abused and mistreated, and you find it hard to understand a man. Your first play with a man should be real play, where you understand our fears or energy, our banter, how we interact. Because if you can understand a man and if you can play with a man, women who can play with men can easily understand, manipulate, encourage the man in their lives. Foreplay should not be the first play that you have with a man. Now, interestingly, number 10 is that beauty is never enough. No amount of beauty, no amount of attractiveness will be sufficient to satisfy a man's thirst for sex and will be sufficient to keep him from straying. I have said many times that what keeps a man from going astray is his conscience. That conscience is built over time. It has to be built in a way that it transcends himself. So it has to be connected to a value system, whether that value system is based on science, morality, religion, karma, but it has to be connected to something that he places above himself, something that he recognizes as a goal to be strived for, and therefore something he has to align himself with. No amount of beauty can keep a man from straying. As a matter of fact, many a times when a man cheats on a woman who is very attractive, he often cheats with a woman who is less attractive than you are. No amount of femininity can keep a man from straying. As a matter of fact, most of the time, it has nothing to do with you. We go back to what I said before about a man's need. You have to identify his needs very early. And number two, you have to understand the nature of his conscience. A woman with the ability to speak to a man's conscience will do more to keep a man from straying than a woman with beauty. Now, but I hope that makes sense, but if it does, I hope it works. The next, which is I think number 11, many women misconstrued what I think is the inevitable reality. And this is connected to the previous item, which is number 10. And that is that every single man, unfortunately and fortunately, will be faithful, and a man's faithfulness to you is inversely proportional to the opportunities that are available to him and his success. So, in the words of the great Professor Lycus, a man is only as faithful as his options. And let me expand on that slightly. If I were to take a man who is an average looking man, say in terms of looks, maybe a 5, and he desires women who are 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s. If the women around him are only 2s and 3s, who he doesn't find attractive, and he says, well, I've never slept with anyone else but you, my wife, that is not a measure of his faithfulness. The reason I say so is because he has no interest in those women. They're out of his league, or rather, not above, not up to his league. On the other hand, if the man is surrounded by women who are beautiful, attractive, and those he finds desirable, and he tries to approach them, but he cannot, either because he has no gain, no wealth, or doesn't have the fame, he doesn't have the influence, and therefore he's not successful in attracting those women. He might also come back and say, I've never cheated on you. Again, false. The reason being that the opportunities available to him and his success are inversely proportional to his faithfulness. To put it in more simple terms, a man who has wealth, who has influence, notoriety, fame, money, usually sets the right bar, because it means he has all of the things that most women want. Now, if this man also has the looks, then it means the opportunities available to him will be vast. And therefore, if he refuses to be tempted, despite having all of the attractive opportunities and having all of the attractive traits and resources, then genuinely you can say he has been faithful. So, again, a man's faithfulness is inversely proportional to the opportunities of women around him and to his success. So women, ladies, don't believe a man when he says, oh, I've been faithful to you. Now this also means that generally speaking, the younger a man is, the less resources he has, the less money he has, the less fame, influence he has. And therefore, the balance of power in any relationship between a man and a woman is skewed on the woman's side. A woman who's 25 has a much higher sexual marketplace value and higher reproductive fertility value, and therefore she brings more to the negotiating table than a man who's 25, who's just begun his career. He can be faithful to you, but let's fast forward 10 years, he's 35, he's built some wealth, he has influence, he has money, he has a network of friends who are doing very well, and therefore he can afford women from 18 years up to 35 and above. That's when we start judging, when he's successful and when he has opportunities around him. Now this brings me to number 12, which is in the dating marketplace, we date women who turn us on. We date based on beauty and youth and sex appeal and attractiveness. In the marriage marketplace, or when it comes to relationship, we do not choose women who turn us on alone. We choose women who do not turn us off. And by turn off, I'm talking about more intellectual, emotional, attitude. That counts way more than beauty. Beauty is a commodity. The more wealth a man has, the more he becomes a rarity. The more wealth a man has, the more beautiful women become a commodity. The key thing to keep in mind is that beauty fades, but a dumb woman remains a dumb woman. And so, if you do not bring peace into our lives, if you turn us off with your behavior and your attitude, we seldom choose you as a life partner. Now, number 13, and this is where I've seen people make mistakes. Women say, well, he told me he loved me, and he told me I am the best. What we say when you leave matters more than what we say to your face. If you really want to know what a man thinks about you, try to find out what he says after you leave, what he says behind your back, what he says to his friends, family, close inner circle association. That matters the most. We will say anything for sex, for intimacy, for your affection, for your love. Is what we say behind your back that matters. And number 14, as I bring today's session to a close, is generally speaking, we only want 3 things. Whether we are in the dating marketplace or the relationship marketplace. 3 S's: sex, serenity, servitude. Really that simple. And now finally, we all have certain weaknesses. Every man has a weakness. You play a part in protecting what we call our soft spot, which means our life is in your hands. A man would tell a woman of his weaknesses, but we do so at our peril, because most of the time we share such a secret with the wrong woman. A woman who is wise learns about a man's secrets and she protects them. Now those are 14 things that I wish most women would understand about men.